been getting it from me for years.
Good evening, everyone. I will now call to order the study session meeting of March 10th, 2022. Members of the public are invited to attend in-person city council meetings in council chambers on the lower level of City Hall. Public access to tonight's meeting is also available on the Local Government Access Channel 8 for Comcast subscribers and on the city's YouTube channel online, and by telephone using the call-in numbers posted on the meeting agenda. Joanna, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Lighty.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wolford.
Here.
Councilmember Vukovic will be absent. Councilmember Hadamio.
Here.
Councilmember Duran-Malika will be absent. Councilmember Lukman-Hiramasa.
Here.
Councilmember Goff.
Here.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Walker.
Here.
Thank you.
Excellent. We have two items for this study session. The first one is our Civic Center revised conceptual site plan. Jay Renkins is here with MIG. Hello.
Hi.
You can take it away.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all for the time this evening again. Again, Jay Rankins, principal with MIG. I have been tasked with representing the work of the Continuum team, MIG, kind of bridging the city staff and the Continuum team and staff itself. And so our agenda, what we wanted to do is just a really quick recap where we left off. We want to focus pretty much the entire presentation on the new development concept and using some of those key takeaways from our conversations that I had presented last time to highlight some of the key moves, kind of thought, rationale that went into this site plan, and then a little bit about moving forward. So where we left off, I think you remember after preparing the summary memo, presenting that to you, we presented a few exploratory concepts, we called them, and there was a lot of excitement around some of the key moves, key components of this concept A that we were calling it. And so you'll see tonight the concept that has been developed by the Continuum team with our help has really, I think, stayed true to a lot of the spirit of this and actually has improved in many ways. So we'll highlight some of those key components, some of the differences, some of the new additions that I think really make it special. Just a reminder of that view from Concept A. Since our last meeting, the Continuum team, staff, and MIG have been working collaboratively to adjust Concept A. There has been emphasis on exploring and testing the City Hall in the southeast corner. That was direction from City Council last time, was even if it takes a little longer maybe to get the overall site plan refined to the level that's necessary to do all the detailed analysis and refinement, could we actually test and confirm the City Hall site? So that is something that will be discussed this evening as well. Looking also at the refinement of the commercial and retail concept, how it can be most successful and best contribute to a destination. And a lot of thought devoted to the placemaking, so I'll be highlighting that throughout as well. So, the new development concept. Without further ado. So we went from that previous development concept on the left, which is the one that we ended up talking to you all about in those council conversations, to the plan on the right. I know it's a little tough to see, so first of all, we'll zoom in here a little bit. So some of the major components, and we'll step through these one by one. But the City Hall is in this southeast corner like we were looking at. We're looking at townhomes ringing this southern and western edge, ringing parking rather than having exposed parking here. Live-work units along Memorial Parkway. A commercial cluster that is oriented both to Community Center Drive as well as to Memorial Parkway to really create a sense of place. Townhomes fronting the Community Center Drive again, front doors facing this direction. And then the workforce housing clustered up here in the north and west portions of the site. Again, wrapped parking in all scenarios. Lots of opportunities for activation, some of which you can see on the screen here, some of which we'll zoom in on and show you. So those key elements, again, City Hall is more welcoming and respectful in that corner, we believe. Really thinking about that orientation. There's been a bit of preliminary exploration of what that might kind of do on that site, and the AMD team will be speaking to that a little bit later. But we do know that it can fit there. It can work there with the existing city hall, so there's some key components. They can elaborate on the rest of that. More integrated commercial opportunities, which is opportunities for additional ground floor activation along Memorial Parkway. So those live-work units are part of that component. Also splitting the commercial up between a couple buildings and really fronting Memorial Parkway rather than being a standalone kind of feeling along Community Center Drive. Better cross-development connections and circulation, small parks, plazas, green spaces distributed throughout, and more diverse housing options as well. And more distributed housing options we'll get to in a second here. So again, we're looking at that kind of typical view here, kind of looking from above the park, looking southwest across the site. You can see the City Hall nestled here in the hillside, the Veterans Memorial, really respecting that rectangle that we were talking about, kind of that civic rectangle. Everything stepped back from that. Plenty of placemaking opportunities being displayed along Memorial Parkway, but it doesn't stop there. We really tried to create key connections. There's actually a walkway kind of cut through here, connecting all the way to the front door of the theater. The location of this would really be civic parking, is in a strategic location where it could be shared as overflow parking for the civic uses. So not just for City Hall, but also for the rec center and theater facility. And then kind of some of the highlights on the north end, looking at a park space to serve the multi-family units and the workforce housing, a dog park potential behind the site, connections to the existing trail network, ideas for improvements to the I-25 underpass, as well as these key connections cutting through to some of the key destinations, connecting the commercial, for instance, connecting the site from north to south, and then also this frontage being really important with a civic presence, a commercial presence, and these kind of front stoops of the townhomes. Here's another view. We're kind of floating above the hotel, looking southeast at this point. So City Hall is furthest away from us in this view. So you can see even these parking areas, one, they're enclosed, but even within them, we've created amenities and connections, so they're very well connected for the pedestrian environment. And again, linking all of that together with the existing trail network, introducing a new trail to the north, and I'll talk about some of the crossings as well.
Show me where the rec center is on that view.
Right here.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then this is Memorial Parkway connecting over to E.B. Rains Park. So now we are actually looking across from E.B. Rains Park. We're up in the air just a little bit so we can see above the trees, looking towards the rec center. So this is the front door of the rec center, the theater being up here on the hill a little bit. We're catching a little bit of the potential City Hall design here, looking at the complement kind of plaza to the Veterans Memorial Plaza, this respectful setback of a commercial use here, kind of a market hall concept or food hall concept here in the front. And then again, looking at this kind of connected space with a lot of activity and programming along Memorial Parkway. Now we're looking from the rec center, just above the rec center, looking back towards the park. So I was talking about that program activity, looking at opportunities for splash pad, picnic. We have food trucks in here. So obviously those are all potential. Looking at the quality of space. This is probably one of the better views of these live-work units. The idea being that they're a townhome product of sorts, but the ground floor has the potential to be used as a small retail or commercial space. I think I mentioned to a couple of you in some of our conversations, I live in a building that has these on the ground floor. There's about 10 of them, and currently 3 are used as active commercial space. The other are used as residential, but it provides that flexibility. When I first moved in, there was only 1. Now there's 3. And so I'm hopeful at some point there's 10, we'll see. But so over time, then that Memorial Parkway space could become even more activated. That does 2 things. It provides that flexibility. It also sets in expectations for people living along Memorial Parkway that they're in a unique type of unit, that there's going to be programming, there's going to be activation along that key spine. So one of the things that in that kind of summary of key takeaways was this idea of a strong desire for a destination. Really we focused on framing and activating Memorial Parkway and the community center drive. So thinking about City Hall and how does its program start to play out and interact with the site? How is its kind of front door, its foyer, kind of interacting with the Parkway, with the Memorial Plaza? Thinking about those live-work units as well as the commercial orientation along there, all interacting with both the park at the one end and the City Hall, kind of anchoring the civic uses at the east, and the recreation center, senior center, and theater anchoring those civic uses on the west, with plenty of activation and destination opportunities in between. The dynamic mix of uses is really important too, kind of spread throughout the site. So that no area is sort of single use. What happens with a single use area typically is that it's really active for part of the day or part of the week, and then the rest of the time it's not very active. So we really try to distribute that. Looking at strong civic anchors at both ends, as I mentioned, and then placemaking throughout. We'll keep coming back to that, just to remind you the plan view there. The highest emphasis on Memorial Parkway. So protection and respect for the rectangle, as we were describing before. The emphasis on placemaking along Memorial Parkway, although there are opportunities other places. So that includes the additional public spaces that complement and support the festival lawn and Veterans Memorial. So I'll point some of those out now. So the Veterans Memorial, the addition of a sort of entry courtyard of sorts for the City Hall, festival lawn. There's actually an easement that cuts down through here and cuts kind of at an angle right here, kind of just outside the door from where we are currently. And so I guess it would be, maybe it's that direction. This is actually, we're looking at maybe sort of an art plaza in this location, kind of pulling these buildings back a bit. There's this, like I said, a little parklet kind of nestled in here on the north end of the parking area for the multifamily, the dog park here, and then improvements potentially, at least on this back edge, to the drainage area to make that an amenity as well. And then you can see, as I pointed out previously, these kind of key connections through here. And so this actually creates one because of the angle of the parking back here to create a picnic area for civic employees. And then also along these key connections, as I said, north-south, east-west. A desire for more integrated retail and other community uses. So the reconfigured retail, so it has visibility from Community Center Drive, which was something that the previous site plan was trying to achieve. So we've still retained that to a certain extent. There's a better relationship to Memorial Parkway now, though. And then an outdoor plaza, or several outdoor plazas, cafe seating and programming potential associated with those. So the idea that there'd be plaza spaces associated with the retail itself. This would be the specific retail opportunities, but again, that could be complemented over time with some ground floor uses in the live-work units. And then also thinking about the access that was suggested. I think it was by one of the council members actually last time, the additional access here. And so it actually was a fantastic sort of exploration, because we ended up, while we didn't locate it right where was suggested, that was a little too close to the Memorial Parkway access. We did introduce a new access here, which then started to make us think about that access to the south. And so this is actually a pedestrian and emergency access only, because that's at the curve. And so it would preclude a pedestrian crosswalk there, and it would make a pretty tumultuous kind of turning situation on the curve. And so now we're just off the curve. We can add a pedestrian crossing here, a really nice formal pedestrian crossing at the signal that will be added at Memorial Parkway, and then a pedestrian crossing here as well. There is the ability to potentially use some of the parking in the park, both as overflow for something that might be happening at City Hall, and vice versa. The civic parking that I mentioned back here could be help with park uses as well with this location. Along those lines of the desire for more integrated retail uses, I've mentioned it a couple times already, but just to highlight one more time, this idea of the live-work. I wanted to show a couple of photo examples of what that might look like. So again, it's generally a 3-story kind of townhome product, but the ground floor has higher glazing, is kind of situated so that you could do retail or commercial uses, at-home business perhaps, in that space. I've seen artists use those spaces in some situations. Type and location of housing. So beyond the live-work units along the Memorial Parkway, thinking about the distribution, making sure there was, if you remember, there was that sentiment that there was too much concentration of certain housing in one location on the site. So this really distributes with the multifamily kind of wrapping through this portion, kind of being mirrored right here a little bit. The townhomes are distributed now with some here, and then back here, and then those live work being right here. So again, an even broader mix of housing and more distributed throughout the site. There are concerns about parking, if you remember, the visibility of the parking, the quantity of the parking, the kind of the feel of the parking. And so the parking is generally wrapped in almost every instance with buildings to enhance that pedestrian experience. So an example being, you know, this is a parking lot back here, but it's wrapped on all sides by townhomes or live-work units. Similar with the live-work units, commercial building, townhomes, and multifamily workforce housing here. And so that's one key piece. The other I had mentioned already is the strategic positioning of the civic parking to really allow it to be shared by civic uses. The other piece is looking at enhanced walkways connecting through the parking lots, as well as opportunities for landscaping to enhance the aesthetics and the sustainability throughout the site. So those will be things that will continue to be examined. What are the, you know, is pervious pavers the right choice? Is a pervious pavement of some sort? Maybe it's bioswales along there. And then one of the last pieces to highlight were the thought around weak connections and low priorities given to the existing assets. So really tried to be respectful, first and foremost, to Community Center Drive and E.B. Rains Park, one of the existing assets that the community holds so dear. So looking at that strong frontage along Community Center Drive, and then the relocation of the City Hall to serve as an anchor and having a relationship with E.B. Rains and Veterans Memorial. The one thing I do want to point out, and I think Stefan and team will speak to this a little bit more and probably a little more eloquently, they have this, this has sort of inspired them, and I'll let them speak to it, but to steal their thunder just slightly, they're talking about the idea of the City Hall kind of in the park, and the park kind of extending a bit, you know, onto the west side of Community Center Drive. And we do think there's absolutely opportunities to do that, particularly on the east and the north sides of the site. We're depicting on the west and the south as well, which we're hopeful could be achieved. There's some trade-offs, obviously, with that. That's more land that's used for civic uses and so on and so forth. But we do think from a parking standpoint, access standpoint, that could probably work. But that's something that through further refinement, like all of probably the parking areas, the circulation to a certain point, you know, how wide are certain things? Is it the exact layout of the striping that you would have in the parking lots, right? Is it the exact number of buildings? Those things will adjust a little bit over time as we do a deeper dive into certain things, but the intent, I think, is really strong. So I just wanted to point that out with that little red box there and the little blue box there. One thing that this does also do, whether it's parking or park space, sort of surrounding the City Hall, is this site, as opposed to the previous plan, which had it on the north side of Memorial Parkway, allows for an expansion later too. Maybe it's 20 years down the road, maybe it's 50 years down the road, so that's a potential either way. Also looking at enhanced pedestrian pathways, I guess I've said that probably 3 times now, but the additional green space and plazas incorporated throughout. There's the dog park idea, parklet for the workforce housing, the art plaza I mentioned, picnic area, as well as seating plazas, both along Memorial Parkway and situated within the commercial spaces. There's this idea that I have not mentioned yet, which is the idea of a flexible Woonerf at the north end of the site.
What's the what?
Yes, you'll be the envy of the entire metro area with your own Woonerf.
What is that?
So this is a European concept. Most closely translated as a living street. And so the picture over here on the far right, it's typically in a residential area, in some sort of Scandinavian countries where it's most prevalent. They intentionally sort of take away the delineation between uses. And so it really feels like a pedestrian kind of bike space, but cars can move through it. They can access that. So it could be used for pedestrians and bikes, it could be used for play. It could be used even for, maybe a community event for the folks living on the site. A Wunnerf, yeah.
I've Googled it, we're on board.
All
Love
right,
it.
all right, great.
All right, so-
Lastly, on this idea of weak connections and low priority given existing assets, movement, the northern access, as I mentioned, to locate the pedestrian crossing a safer and more convenient location. We ensured that we had those 3 well-spaced connections to the park across to the site. And then, as we mentioned, those ideas to improve the underpass of I-25 and better connect the transit center. So cleaning that up, lighting it. Mark actually has some amazing ideas about some innovative transportation technologies that could be integrated into that, maybe with some grant funding or other opportunities. So we think that's a really key component to connecting the people who would be on the site or visiting the site or wanting to visit the site, to the transit center. All right. So next steps. As I mentioned, we've moved very, very fast to get to this point collectively as a team. It's been really fun to be a part of, but while it looks fantastic and it might look final in these renderings, we do our best to kind of inspire you. There is refinement to be done still, so I want to emphasize that. But I think the spirit is on track. I think it's very close to where we want to be. The exploration of ownership is going to be important, particularly as we start to intermingle the civic uses and private uses and introducing a lot of these public spaces and public amenities. There's an infrastructure analysis and phasing that will need to be looked at, financial analysis, pro forma, and then getting to the renegotiation of the redevelopment agreement. So with that, we'd like to take any questions you may have or comments.
Councilmember Brown.
Look at that. I have 2 questions for you.
Yeah.
Not for you, but this one's for Brooke.
Okay.
Brooke, with those work-live units and code the way it is right now, will they be able to live on that bottom floor, or will they be restricted to living only on the 2nd floor and up?
They'll be able to live on all floors.
And what makes that different than other projects that we talked about recently?
So the distinction here is, and Eric, help me out if I miss a piece to this, but essentially what you're doing is you're creating a space that's rated for commercial activity that you can also live in. And with the rezoning that we did of the property, just before we started off, or just shortly after we started with the rec center, we enabled that zoning does enable for this to occur. So it's a distinction in which you can actually have a commercially rated space that's also livable.
Now, on that commercial-related space that's also livable, does the front of it look different than the ones that are not, that they're not living in?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a delineation between that?
I'll try to get back to those guys there. So these are all examples of live-work units. So typically you'd see a front stoop, a front door, a bay window at the front of these if they were regular townhomes that were all meant to be residential all the time. That's what you could expect sort of north along Community Center Drive where we pointed out the southern edge of the site. The ones along Memorial Parkway would have, again, we call it a high level of glazing. It kind of feels more like a storefront, has a front door for a store, but they can double as a residential. Yeah, sorry, Mark.
A good example of that is on Tennyson. As you get closer to 44th, there's a bunch of units that have this same type of frontage that are live-work type of spaces.
And again, the only thing I would add to what Brooke said is that building codes have incorporated this concept in recent editions of building codes that might not have been there, 10 years ago in the building code. So it does contemplate.
One thing I would just like to weigh in on, though, is that, I think 2 things are working in our favor for these units, is that with more people having flexible work arrangements where they're working from home, I think we'll see more activation, actually, of these kinds of units than we could have anticipated 5 years ago. I will also say that sometimes when you go overboard and you create too much transparency and you're in a space that isn't really lend itself well to real conventional commercial, maybe it's a small office or something, you can end up with a lot of opacity where people pull blinds down for privacy, and that can almost make it worse. So I think we have to find just the right balance of not going overboard with too much transparency in, say, mid-block locations, but still have built the storefront so that in 10 years, 15 years, when there's maybe perhaps more demand for more conventional commercial apparatus, somebody could literally replace their windows easily to be something more accommodative to that in the future.
Okay. My second question goes back to the second entry into the development. And this goes back to how we had to change Community Drive, Is that where it becomes, where it's one lane? I mean, like, it shoots from the 2 to the 1. Where's the hospital from there?
Hospital would be down
Joanna's head.
here.
Down there? So those houses don't back to Webster Lake Promenade. What's the distance?
These
Yes.
homes right here. This is the parking lot for Webster Lake Promenade, the most northern portion. The buildings would, I'm off the screen. But the buildings would be back just a little bit further here.
Okay.
There's a parking lot separating the where the Perry's Pizza is. That's the pad site.
Okay.
That we're talking about.
And then along here, there's the existing berm that's at the south side of that parking lot. And then the concept would be to introduce a trail connection, as well as an emergency access drive paralleling that, to make sure that there's access for the multifamily units. And it would connect to the north end of the VUNERF, as we call it.
I know that Brooke is going to tell me that all the studies have been done, so I just need not to worry about it. But all these homes, right, and businesses and whatever, the traffic on Community Center Drive, we don't have much right now, right? But it seems to me that the density here is going to create more traffic. Are we going to have to, widen that road to, after the curve to allow for that traffic, or is that going to cause congestion back to 120th?
So with the original master plan, we contemplated a density that's far greater than what we're contemplating now. And so to that end, when we looked at the master plan, we did not look at any additional roadway infrastructure improvements. The one issue that we had under the master plan is that the intersection of Community Center Drive and 120th, that movement currently operates in a C, D level of service, and F is bad, A is good.
Okay.
With the exception of one movement, and that's the double left turn movement going westbound on 120th.
Right.
That operates in the peak hour in the PM at a level service E and F, depending on traffic volume. So the thing is that the entire intersection with the higher density we originally contemplated, we were not seeing a significant increase in deterioration in traffic, but there was definitely an increase in traffic. So
Yeah.
I'm not trying to undersell it, but I think that based on where we were in the study and where we are now, it's a much lesser impact overall.
The reason that I ask these questions is partially stemming from the motorcycle accident, and I'm worried that so much traffic on our narrow road, which basically it is going to be a problem. I think it's something that doesn't affect you right now, but it's something as a city that we need to think about moving forward because, it could be a mess. I mean, think about it, 4th of July. Think about it when we have an occasion down there where that road is open and what it does to congestion in traffic. And I know you've done all the studies, but I got to tell you that when you were talking D, E, and F, that really concerned me. If A is, what is acceptable?
Basically zero traffic, it's free flowing. So yeah, I think to help speak to some of your concern is that we also need to be looking at when the peak hour of the different uses are, and that's going to be another key component because, if it's residential, it's morning and evening, but keep in mind that the residential traffic is going to be coming to the site, not leaving the site. So when I mentioned when I mentioned that, the northbound double left going on to 120th is westbound, well, that's people leaving the area, not people coming to the area.
Right.
So when we do the traffic, because the traffic study will be required as part of this entitlement package, we'll look at how that, what we call travel demand, and where that distribution of those turn movements and where they're going to be coming from. I think, to your point, is that there's going to be more traffic volume, but it's not necessarily going to be in the wrong direction or the wrong way, because it's going to be coming from other approaches that aren't happening them now and that have level of service issues.
Well, you gotta come home after you leave,
Right.
and the rec center's there. So I just want that on the record, that community center drive is a real concern for me.
Understood.
The other one thing I wanted to say is, Jay, I found our sculpture site, and I think I found our site for a community garden over there. Okay, I'll hold the rest of my questions and give everybody a chance.
Thank you. Councilmember Goff?
Thank you. So first of all, did we hear, or can you tell us the number of parking spaces in this plan?
I did not do the takeoff.
Okay, I was just kind of
actually.
wondering how it compared to
Do we have it
the
on the-
previous.
I might have it.
Okay.
And while he's looking that up, I guess I have somewhat of a concern. Some of us, work and drive, at frantic speed to get here for these meetings. And if the only parking, is going to be up by the rec center because everybody's filled in parking spaces closer to the Civic, or the new City Hall.
If everyone parked here.
Yeah, I
already.
mean, I'm just kind of a little concerned about if, do we need reserve parking? But then
Yeah,
if then
there
you
is
have to.
parking along this back area as well. Let me, all right, here we go. So there is head-in parking here. This is probably, I think it's about 60 spaces right here.
Okay, well, my guess.
And then all
yeah.
of this would be civic parking as well. These are all self-parked units.
If we decide that we need reserve parking, then there's the whole enforcement issue and stuff like that. So that's just something that I would like to see
yeah,
be addressed
Yep.
at some point.
Yeah, and we were actually like up until today, looking at those boxes that I had around the City Hall site. We were showing parking sort of on the west and south side. So that's an option, to have that more convenient, reserve parking, more parking close to the building. Those are definitely options that can be worked through with the City Hall site as well as with the overall kind of pro forma analysis for the overall development.
Okay, that would be my only question.
I mean, are we gonna move where all of our utility trucks park that are out in back? And our employees and,
Yes, we'll figure out. That's a level of detail that we haven't gotten there yet, but thanks for raising that concern, and we'll work through all those details as we move forward.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a number of questions as well that kind of touch on what some of my colleagues have brought up. First, we spent a little bit of time talking about Community Center Drive and some potential traffic impacts there. I'm really interested in the Memorial Parkway. Can the Parkway as it is sustain this level of density? Because it already feels very narrow to me now, just driving down.
Yeah.
So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, the single lane in each direction. Again, going back to the master plan is what we were leaning on. We did a traffic study. We actually, I think we fired one traffic engineer and brought in another one. The FHU, who the city had trusted much more, came on and did a traffic study for the site, not only looking at Community Center Drive, but looking at the internal circulation. And when we had a denser program that actually thought that we could do structured parking, so you could actually fit, much more density on the site. The single lane in each direction, 2-lane roadways, did suffice throughout. And again, not everyone would be, I think the majority of people who actually are accessing this portion of the site would likely be using this northern access. People accessing, the commercial might, maybe they miss that turn and they come back around here. City Hall, some people might do this, but I think really Memorial Parkway is going to serve primarily the Recreation Center, Theater, and Senior Center. And then you have the south access still as well, which will be enhanced. Right now it's a driveway, and it'll be a more enhanced access drive.
Okay, that's helpful. I appreciate you pointing out those different points of entry. 'Cause
Absolutely.
Initially, I was like, how are we getting all of those cars down that one road? So
Yeah.
that helps quite a bit. And then You all may not be here yet, so if you're not, that's okay. But based on what you've rendered, how many units are you anticipating between townhomes as well as multifamily?
He's the numbers guy.
Confirm it so I get it right. So in the multifamily units, there's 120, 122 right now, 34 townhomes, 19 live work. So that would be 160 or so in total.
All right, that's helpful. And have you gotten to a point of figuring out, are any of these units going to be affordable housing, workforce housing? Are any of them going to be senior level housing? Part of the reason I'm really interested in the senior housing is we broke ground today on affordable senior apartments. And I know that that's something that we've continually brought up in conversations, is that desire to ensure that, we're providing opportunities to age in place. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, the 120 multifamily units there, I think it was referenced at one of the last meetings as well. Those are targeted towards a workforce demographic, kind of the 60 to 120% AMI, mixed income, if you will, across those. Mark spoke at the last meeting a little bit about, sort of designing those in a way so that they're in these high-value locations with the amenities nearby and whatnot, and can provide, housing for, all age groups for sure. So that's what the 120 multifamily units are targeted at. Mark, I don't know if you want to add anything more on the.
No, and what's good to, again, be reminded is they are perpetually rent restricted. So it's not as though we are simply building to that market. We actually will constrain rent growth. They'll be in an entity that will be by charter required to maintain rents that are attainable and affordable in perpetuity. It's very possible, especially with the way the buildings break up, that we could take a specific building and design it more specifically for seniors and really chase that market and the way we position the building and market it. I think we'd be intrigued to really explore that, actually.
Okay, great. And I apologize if that's a repeat from your past session.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
All right, I just have one other question. How are you all thinking about some of our sustainability conversations and layering that in with this plan? Is that something that, the details will be figured out later? Are you already thinking about some of those details?
Yeah, we have sort of a corporate standard that we don't build below. I think we built some of the first LEEDs buildings in the state, and we continue to always push the envelope on that. So it is a function of what we do, and on a particular project like this, we haven't really gone and measured the LEED ratings that would be attainable here, but I can't conceive that we wouldn't be building to a minimum of a silver LEEDs rating.
Okay, all right, but EV ready, PV ready?
Yeah, a lot of the ratings for LEEDs now, are shifting their points to those things. Also, frankly, the access to transit here is particularly compelling.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Okay, that's helpful. As far as comments go, I definitely like the site plan so much more than the previous ones that we've seen. I think there are a lot of major positives to this one, and I'll be interested to hear what my other colleagues have to say. Thank you.
I don't have any more hands right now. I'm going to jump in. The conversation's not closed if you still have thoughts, council, but this really took in all of our feedback, and I really appreciate the work on it. It is incredibly different in very nuanced ways that are super important. It was just great. I mean, as soon as it popped up, I was like, oh, and I am so interested. I don't know if City Hall is going to be that shape, but that's kind of cool. It's very visually appealing from the air. I wonder what animal we could make it. We have it's a penguin. Maybe it's a penguin. I don't know what it is, but so I mean, it really does shift it from being kind of generic to really being special. And that's what we were looking for. So it feels really good in addition to having all of the elements checked off. So, but I know, like going through the
Mayor,
The
can I
memo.
interrupt you for 1 second? I'm
Yes,
sorry.
please.
I just realized on the collaboration slide, I left off Anderson Mason Dale.
Oh.
They've been really critical of this process as well. So they actually provided us with a 3D model to put into this rendering. So
Okay.
I want you to know
I
that.
see them. Hey, guys.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, absolutely.
It's only one. Where do we anticipate, I guess I'm coming back to Brooke, crosswalks from this area over to EB Rains?
Right here. Sorry, Brooke.
No, go for it.
Right here and right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we from a city need to think about how we control those. You know what I mean?
And the other aspect here is that this intersection's the signal. This will be signalized, PED controlled. And so the other thing we'll need to look at is how this interfaces with the existing trail system and making sure we have those proper connections, et cetera.
Thank
So
you.
that'll be all part of when we get to that phase of the development packaging, we'll be looking at all those things very closely.
And to echo off of what Mayor Pro Tem said, will we be placing EV stations throughout this complex? I'm going to call it a complex, this community. Or is that, really, we're just looking at it as a city hall function at this time?
So in terms of EV readiness, there's a couple of moving parts. We have some regulations in our code now that accommodate for that. We're also looking at in the fall of this year, is bringing back to council with the adoption of the 2021 IBCs, is some stretch codes that are also going to be looking at that. And part of that stretch code is going to be a percentage of spaces that will have EV, and a percentage of, especially in parking lots, a percentage of EV-ready infrastructure, so that if in the future there's expansion. The challenge that we are recognizing through that separate process is emerging technology and making sure that we're not creating a standard that becomes obsolete in 5 years. So, and I know that Jenny's been part of that process that we're working on as well. So, but we plan to bring that back to council in the fall.
Councilmember Jaramillo?
Great job on the design. I love the evolution I've seen, the less density that we have. But I also really enjoy the aesthetic and design of City Hall and some of the input that I gave you on the dynamic design. And I did put the input for it to point north, like an arrow pointing north for Northglenn. So no animals, but like a. So I'll take a little bit of credit for that one. So thank you for that. That was that's so cool. Like I think it really does have like a dynamic design, and it looks, has a cool function like that puts us, on the map. Like you see it like literally pointing north. So cool.
I will say that we've reserved some space for AMD to talk specifically about the City Hall site as well, once we get through the questions. So.
Perfect. Councilmember Luqman Hiramasa?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is wonderful. It was great, the last presentation, but again, I think you really listened to everybody and incorporated this. This has that feel that I think we've been looking for as the heart of the plan. It definitely feels like that. The biggest difference for me, I think, that I really like about this layout, as opposed to the first one we saw, is that density. Before it just looked really crowded, it didn't look, didn't have all those special areas. So this, the way it's laid out, I know it can change a little bit, but I think it really allows for more of that feeling of community and open space. I really love the idea of that walkway to the theater and having paths that connect the Civic Center to EB Rains. I think that's pretty cool. One of the questions I had, you mentioned improving the underpass, I-25, and I know that's a kind of a big issue for us because there's safety concerns, and it's just not a lovely place or a very safe place, and there's a lot of improvements that need to go there. So I'm just curious. I know it's still in the works, and maybe you're not ready to talk about it, but what some of those improvements could look like, or what are some of those? I'm just curious.
I might let Heather and Mark talk to that. You guys were most eloquent, I think, when we were
Mark, do you want to do
brainstorming.
the big picture idea, and then I'll do the practical?
Sure. I mean, I think that, look, there's a massive federal infrastructure bill that is going to be unfurling itself over the next, year. And, that bill was written to really distribute investment to accelerate transit use. And, I think it would be very difficult to expand the width of that tunnel. That's a very expensive proposition. But what could be possible is to, get some kind of a pilot mechanism where autonomous vehicles, shuttles, go back and forth in between. And those things do work really well when you have a very defined guideway system where you're going from one place to the other. I've walked under that tunnel a few times, and even in the middle of day, it can be quite uncomfortable because it's so long. And if your method of getting back and forth was through one of these autonomous vehicles where you felt more protected and safe, I think that would help. And but I think it's going to take getting ahead of this process. I think it would be great to engage a consultant to begin to put together some ideas so that when those funding priorities are starting to be brought forward, you're kind of ready. And you've got, and exciting ideas tend to get people's attention. And this is such an extraordinary park and ride resource to be able to really effectively open it up to this side of the highway. I can imagine all kinds of people walking from many of these other adjacent neighborhoods if you had something as powerful as that to get them over. The other thing I would like to say, as well as I've got the mic, is that, Mayor, we like this plan a lot better too. We really do.
I worry about our homeless population in that tunnel, because we're gonna to run vehicles through there and things like that. We're gonna displace them. I know that, they should not be living in the tunnel, but the fact of the matter is they are. So my humanitarian side worries about that. And then the other side of me says, well, how do we make it safe for the people that need to go through the tunnel? Because these people, a lot of them, I took the bus downtown. You don't realize how shocking that is. These people are probably going to use, if they're not working from home, transit. Because if we look at the gas prices and all that good stuff, we're looking at, even other people are looking at more alternative uses, I just worry about that tunnel, the homelessness problem that we have, and they use them. Sorry, that's my...
And that's one of the challenges that I think the city is making strides with our crew program. Jessica and her staff have been out on the street making contact with our individuals experiencing homelessness. So it's that first strong point is that connection to the crew program. We've made some strides over the last several months in just the maintenance of the tunnel, being in the tunnel more frequently, making sure we have the staff support to get in and clean the tunnel. So I think you're going to see that approach evolve in the coming months. The other piece that Amanda's working on is hiring a consultant to do the CPTED, so the crime prevention through environmental design. As you recall, we expanded the focus. That idea really came about from the Webster Lake Park safety concerns, the conversations that council had last July. And so we've expanded it to include the tunnel and then to go southeast along the Farmers High Line to capture that area all the way south to Maui, so that we're really looking at this whole area more globally and holistically. And so there's more work to be done on that front in terms of different strategies and techniques we can use to make the tunnel more welcoming. One example that other communities have used is music, putting music in the tunnel to make it not so inviting for, just to hang out. Not obnoxious music, or not soothing music, but there's a certain level of music that Commander Walt shared, which is a strategy that more inner cities use, given the transit corridors that they work with every day. So we're going to look at all those different techniques. All to say, one of the exciting things that, speaking to Mark's point about the transit capabilities and opportunities, I think this is really going to open the door for us to engage and collaborate with RTD and to figure out, so
I didn't
the
write
west.
collaborate as much, but
So that
different
west
tactics, but
side, the west side, so when you walk through the tunnel, and you all know where I live, so I've walked my neighborhood into the tunnel over to this festival lawn several times. And so just that feel of what could that area look like in terms of more of an entryway, gateway to whatever we end up calling the Civic Center area, if not Civic Center. So there's a lot of opportunity there. So many details yet to be figured out, but the SEPTED process is going to get underway. We'll continue to make strides with the work we're doing around making contact with individuals experiencing homelessness through crew, and then the strides that Parks maintenance staff is making and making sure we keep the tunnel clean. And then any other suggestions or ideas, we're open to hearing those.
I
Thank
like
you.
the music,
I know.
but the mayor might dance through it if we have
Yeah,
too much.
you know.
Might be an event in our future.
Yeah, dance through the tunnel. Here's the thing, because RTD came to mind. This is such an exciting project, and to connect it to RTD, they need to be providing a service. And I know, Brooke, you're going to be thinking about this too, but I think as a city, we're going to have that conversation with RTD, because we'd love to sell it like, hey, this is a great place to live because we're so close to public transportation, and yet there's no routes for you. That's not going to work, right? So I think that is going to have to be a conversation that we have. We can collaborate with them. That's a good word. But I think it's something that definitely needs to be talked about, because this would be awesome to just, dance your way to a bus and then get downtown in a more sustainable way. So cool. Well, I think we're ready.
I just wanted to add,
go ahead.
in case anybody, Boulder had that in their the public restroom on Pearl Street Mall down there, where they play music.
Oh.
And the idea is to, I don't know, you can't hang out in there having a conversation, and I guess to discourage people sleeping in there. Now, I don't know if they're still doing it, but they did do that for a while. So I don't know, they might be somebody you could talk to.
Cool. I think we might be ready for the next part.
Can you go to the slide for that?
Thank you so much.
Very
So
pleased with
We're
it.
now going to have Joey come up, and he is going to talk a little bit more about the site planning programming for the city hall.
Good evening, council.
Hi.
Hi.
Joey Carrasquillo with Anderson Masondale Architects. I really don't have a lot to offer today because we haven't designed the city hall yet, but we too are excited about where the plan is going. I think one of the things, and I don't know if we can go back to that aerial.
Let's go back one.
But this was actually the view that our team was looking at when we were presented with the idea that City Hall might move again. And what it did was that it helped reframe our lens a little bit. And what immediately struck us was the immense opportunity to actually expand the relevance of EB range to this project. And to think about how, with the changing complexion of Community Center Drive, with the new signal that's going in, with the crosswalks, that perhaps we could also think about how the western edge of EB Rains Park could actually be redefined to come across the ways. And I think that this image does an incredible job in showing that. And thinking about how the City Hall site and the memorial site and the festival lawn really are an extension of the park. And for us, it quickly triggered this idea that the memorial already is an object. And let's really reinforce it by having it be an object in the park, and the City Hall can follow suit. And so with that, we don't know if that's the final shape of the City Hall, but it does allude to a couple of things that we are excited to explore. Thinking about the building as an object quickly takes you away from simply drawing a square. It allows the opportunity to begin to think about how the shape of the building might begin to create new outdoor spaces that are part of EB Rains Park. I think certainly as it relates to the development of the interior landscape of the building, there's some incredible opportunities with this predominantly north-south orientation that we thank you for. To capitalize on some incredible views back to the park, back to the Front Range, and to Long's Peak. We also wanted to make sure that the memorial, for the most part, had always had access to that 300 days of sun that we have. It was important for us not to build, to think about putting a building, potentially 3 stories, up against the southern edge of the memorial, subsequently having the memorial in shadow a lot of the year, and also providing you all with a north entry into the city hall. How horrible would that be? So I think what we have here are the beginnings of an idea that I think we are really excited about moving forward with on City Hall. So I'll be happy to take any questions. I may not be able to answer them, but
So when will we see you again?
So that we will discuss in the next topic coming up here shortly, where I may have Joey and Stefan jump back up in terms of what we're looking at in terms of engagement through the next phase of City Hall, and what that timeline might look like, and what that level of engagement with council is intended for. So.
I think we might be ready.
You want to do that
Yes.
before budget? Just do it before
Brooke,
budget.
take it away.
Okay, well, we can do it now. All right, let me just pivot here real quick, and Eric's also gonna jump up here. So, I'll tee this up, and then please, Stefan and Joy, please help backfill us. But, you know, essentially, as we progress and if we get consensus tonight on what you've seen so far, the goal is to move into what we call schematic design. Right now, where we are is in space needs assessment. And I'm going to elaborate. I want you to remember that. That's a key tenet to my conversation when we talk about the upcoming budget discussion. But we're just now finishing up. We've finished up space needs. We're about to go into schematic design. That's a 12-week process. And what we've programmed in the second memo are 3 touch points with council. These would be separate meetings from regular council. We want to give this the time and the space that it needs. And so with that, we have a March 30th, which also happens to be the backup for this conversation tonight, which we'll know whether or not that's the case as we proceed further on to our meeting tonight. And then also April 28th and May 25th. And then I'm going to stop there and let them sort of elaborate on what that looks like, what the color behind that is intended to accomplish.
Yeah, so those 3 touch points, they're specific. The first one, as Brooke mentioned, is a follow-up to this, and time and space to reserve a follow-up that is directly on the heels of this presentation you saw, that'll serve as a kickoff. It'll serve to answer a lot of these initial questions that you might have that we don't have time to get to today because the agenda is really full. The second touch point will be really an in-progress schematic design check-in, and it'll be things that may not yet look like fully formed architecture. It'll be things that really give you opportunity to respond to in sketch form, in a process form, and really engage you in that process. And then the third will be near the end of schematic design, in which we've taken your comments and your feedback, similar to you've seen this process go forward, and we'll have more of a developed concept for you all to react to. And keep in mind, schematic design is just 1/3 of the design process. We still, after that, have design development, and then after that, we have construction documentation. So this is really just the beginning third of a much longer design process.
And remember that, because I'm going to be talking about that too here in a minute too. So.
Can I ask another question?
Go ahead.
I think it's really important, and this is, something to do with the area, but we need to get some real public, I don't know if it's comment or get them to attend the meetings, get a little bit more aggressive, sending postcards or something, so that they can at least give feedback before.
We had an initial conversation today,
Okay.
so Brooke can speak
Yeah.
to more of that.
So just so you know, this is not being done in a vacuum, and that we have programmed into the AMD budget an engagement strategy for the community, where what we were discussing today is how much are we informing versus how much are we soliciting input. And so we're going to be working through this process. But for purposes of tonight and knowing that the conversation that we're having overall about this project, we wanted to make sure you understood what we were anticipating for the council engagement. And as we move forward through schematic, We will likely, after schematic and probably in the DD section, is when we'll look to go out and engage the community. But that's a fluid aspect right now. I think we want to know what we're building first and have council consensus on that before we go out to the community and share those thoughts.
I just want to share my opinion on that. We polled the community. We, I mean, look how many times we had events for the community to tell us what they wanted here. I think moving forward, it's engagement to inform versus solicit, ideas, because the community really had 2 years, a year, where we had all kinds of different events. You remember. So in my mind, it's more of informational to engage them than to ask them what they want. So, and for obviously stated reasons.
Well, and I think it depends on which direction we go, because if we're making decisions to spend extra money.
Oh, yeah.
To do super cool things on a building that's unique and special, we want to tell them all about it.
Well, yeah.
I want to let you guys continue, but I want to comment, the packet is really thorough with this. And I like the timeline graphic. I know you're not projecting stuff, but if council wanted to look at page 16, I mean, I know it's a draft, it says draft everywhere, but it's just nice to see that thinking and how the process rolls out.
Of the second packet.
Second item.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
And so I could see where you have public engagement. Yes, exactly. It looks like that. So public engagement is included in that, and I saw that. I appreciate that. So, yeah, sorry, carry on. I think we interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, I think we were done.
No?
Oh, that was it.
So one check-in point, if I may, Mayor and Council. So I sent out placeholders for those 3 meetings, the March 30th and then April 28th and May 25th. I haven't received responses from everyone. We can shift those dates just based on availability of the project team as well as yourselves. So the sooner you can get into Outlook and tell me I know the mayor has told me one date that she cannot attend. We do want the majority of council to attend these sessions because this is really your opportunity to dive deep and help bring this building to life. So we're planning far enough in advance that if you let me know whether or not you can attend, then we can shift if I'm seeing that we're not going to have a majority of council attend those meetings.
I heard May 5th and May 25th.
I'm sorry, March 30th,
Yeah, that, I mean, I got that. but the
April
May-
28th,
Yeah,
and May 25th.
25th, okay.
And that's before Memorial Day weekend, right? Before that.
Yes,
Is it the Thursday before?
It's a
it's a Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Mama's going camping.
Okay. Carry on. We can do
Okay,
that on
so
our
let
own
me
time.
know, and then we'll work on the actual
Okay.
schedule.
And then we have one other very brief update or informational share that we want to have Amanda and Michael Stricker come up to talk about grant opportunity as it relates to art for the City Hall site, so.
Cool.
It is cool. Yes. Hi, everyone. This is the first time that I'm getting to meet one of our council members. So I'm Michael Stricker. I'm the Arts, Culture, and Community Manager for the city. Been here for about 14 years, and I'm also the Director of the Northglenn Arts and Humanities Foundation. So I have a very brief update, but I come bearing good news. So the Northglenn Arts and Humanities Foundation, or NAHF, has already secured $60,000 from the Colorado Creative Industries for public art at City Hall, and just submitted a grant to the SCFD for an additional $150,000 for this project, and the NHF has already committed $40,000. So we will have, if we get the SCFD grant, we'll have $250,000 dedicated to public art at City Hall. at the new City Hall. So it's very exciting. Councilmember Jaramillo is part of that as our liaison and been part of all of those discussions. So we're thrilled to get to work on yet another project. And, you know, the one other thing I wanted to mention that's going to make this unique is that when we go through the selection of an artist and the selection of what this is actually going to be, because we don't know what it's going to be, is that there's always a committee that's created. And in this particular case, because it's City Hall, it'll be a partnership between City Council and the NAHF. So really, this was just a way to get in front of you early on in the process to let you know that this is going to be a possibility. The NAHF is excited, and I'm excited. This is the first I've seen any of this too. So I think we've got a lot of possibility. So
Great.
again, brief update, but are there any questions around that?
I already saw my sculpture.
I was going to say, can I just add 2 items to that? One is that based on the grant that Michael wrote and submitted, it's really broad. But it does, these dollars particularly would be for inside City Hall. So it doesn't preclude other art from happening elsewhere on the site or in addition to that $250,000, but it would be inside City Hall in those public spaces. And that, I think that was it. That was the biggie. It was just that it is indoors at City Hall.
Okay, Councilmember Goff?
Yeah, my question is, this sounds like what we did to get that beautiful sculpture in the rec center in front of the theater. But is there an opportunity for any residents to participate or get feedback in this?
Absolutely. So we've actually done several art commissions over the past several years, and that is the latest one that we did. What's great about these committees is they're very malleable. So we've had committees that are just the NAHF. We've had others that have residents. We have others that have pulled in business owners, all that kind of thing. So we can derive that committee to be whatever we want it to be. So absolutely, you can have residents. We like not to get too big so that we can reach consensus on artwork, which is always difficult. But yes, it'll be made up of City Council and
the reason I'm
NHF.
bringing it up is Councilmember Julie Mullica mentioned last time that she had heard people who had questions about all the sculptures and stuff that we have in the city. I just thought, if we had people, residents on this group, they could communicate that also.
Absolutely.
To the process.
Absolutely. You bet.
Sounds good.
Yeah, Michael, I thank you for all this, but also I wanted to explain that, when I do my ward introduction, to Ward 2, we do a video. I wanted to explain a lot of how we get our funding from Colorado Creative Industries and SCFD and how it's grant funded and it's not coming from the city, not directly their tax dollars. It's the tax that we have, the 1 cent on $10. So that's like, I want to explain that.
Indeed.
Because there's a misconception that it's just coming from the general fund.
Right.
So I explained that last meeting, but I'd love to explain it when I, go on camera, maybe even at our site at the end line, talk about that.
Yeah.
And I think that would be an effective way to communicate that to the public. And
Yeah.
I think that'd be a good way.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and I also to take it a step further, for instance, with the public art project we just did at the Parsons Theater, that was also private donors as well. So on this particular type of project, the NAHF would like to encourage that we do that as well, that we do a fundraiser to, get your name on a plaque kind of thing to help fund this project. So that's a key component in this. So you're right. The income's coming from a lot of different areas to be able to pay for this, particularly through grants, but also donations.
Thank you. Thank you. That was fun. That was fun news. Awesome.
Good. I like coming to fun news, yeah.
Yeah.
Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Only bring fun news.
See, that's why I'm on that committee.
Right?
So now we get to talk about numbers.
Money.
Yahoo.
Okay.
Isn't Jason going to come forward now? She's going to sit back there and listen intently.
He's coached me up well. So.
Okay.
All right. So what I'd like to do in this conversation is we don't have a presentation, but I just want to walk through the staff memo and kind of give some key aspects and perspective on the information that we put together for you on this subject. First off is that there's a couple of different pieces to this puzzle that I want to differentiate to help provide the broad perspective and context to what we're about to cover. First off, is council had asked about sustainability, net zero, so we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about the building program, this building square footage, and then the third leg to this, which is things that we have mentioned to council before, almost as anecdotes and or sidebar conversations related to the overall development of the site. And part of this ties back to the RDA and what we would be looking for as other pieces on the board to be discussing in terms of where these fall into that negotiation. So I just want to put that preface out there up front. That's kind of what we're going to be covering. So to begin with, in the memo, we talked about the baseline assumptions, and this is specific to the City Hall. And so I just want to walk through a few things on this. First off, is that back in 2015, and I went back and actually looked at the report, it was prepared in September of 2014, but we didn't get it to council until early 2015. But we did a space needs assessment that was tied to the evaluation of the Justice Center and that started this entire process that we're in now. That analysis had the original building program at 34,000 square feet for present day with a future build out of about 37,000 square feet. So that was all based on 2014, $15 that we then plugged into the master plan and said, okay, here's our budget. It was around $18 million. Okay. So then we brought on AMD and we said, AMD, we got a $18 million budget. We think these numbers are overly generous in this original analysis because it was really done it was done as an adjunct to the overall analysis for the Justice Center. It was sort of a second leg to that conversation. So we asked AMD to say, how can you fit that programming into this sort of budget? And so that's when we came up with a 27,000 square foot, and that's elaborated more in detail in the memo attachments. A 27,500 square foot planning program. That's when we then engaged the city council and the leadership team on how does this feel? And most of you attended those tours that we did, and that was all part of that process. So the evolution of that is we ended up with a 31,000 square foot building. So that's kind of where the programming is today. So the next part of this is that we also updated the assumptions as well, which was the net zero. And right now we've got a preliminary number of $800,000 for that cost. And then the increase in the building square footage, AMD went back and took a look and basically came up with a number that said it's $2 million. Now, I want to emphasize, and I was joking earlier, this is all based off of a space needs assessment. And as we were talking about, this next level of conversation is schematic design. And then there's DDs, and then there's CDs. Okay, so we've got other steps in this process that's going to provide further refinement, which I'll elaborate in just a moment. So as we were going through this process, one of the things that we're also doing is we're bringing on the general contractor early on in this process. And that's part of our construction manager at risk process, the CMAR process, or the CMGC. There's a bunch of different ways to call it. But nonetheless, we are in the middle of that solicitation process, and we are prepared to bring back that contract to you in April at the April 11th meeting. Part of that solicitation process asked the 3 vendors that submitted proposals to provide us cost estimates. Now, what I want to emphasize is those cost estimates were based off of the attachment that you have in your packet, which is the space needs assessment. So the contractors made broad-based assumptions about how the building was going to be built and what that was going to look like. Do you have a quick question? Because you look like you have a question.
Nope, I'm waiting for the number.
Okay.
That's why the eyeballs are wide
Right.
open. You know where I'm going.
So mind you that what they came up with is actually $2.4 million in round numbers above what the programming estimate was of the $2 million. So I want to emphasize that this is based off of a space needs assessment. This is not based off of building plans. This is not based off of any more level of detail than what we're discussing tonight and what's in your packet. So there's a bunch of variability, but we wanted to give you an update because the other component here that we think is another factor is inflation. And typically for construction construction pricing, and Nate Hastis will hit me over the head if I get this wrong, because he's back there, is that, in Colorado, over time, we typically see like a 3% to 4% year-over-year inflationary cost for horizontal street work and vertical construction. Over the last 2 years, it's been 6% and potentially higher. So that's another X factor that's coming into this. So part of what we identified here is, that the proposals that we got basically showed an additional $2.4 million to that cost. So that's all part of this calculus that's going into the next part of the conversation, which is I'm sorry, let me back up. That is sort of a summation of where we are and how we got to this price for City Hall, okay? Which is later on in the document, I believe we have it at $22.9 million, okay? So that's just roughly where we're at. Any questions on any of that or the territory I just covered? Because I know that's a lot of information.
No, I just want to point council back to the memo because all the numbers are in here. So as you go through everything that you're talking about, I think we tend to look for the presentation.
Yep.
So, but all the numbers are right here,
Right.
and I just wanted all of council to know that, so.
Yeah, and those numbers, the subtotals are on page 3 of 16.
Right.
So that's, in a nutshell, what we're looking at for cost as it relates to the City Hall project, okay? However, this is a Civic Campus Master Plan, and there's these other pieces to the conversation that we also want to bring to your attention that we're essentially rolling into this as the overall budget as it relates to what we would be looking to as far as financial obligations as we move forward. With that being said, there's actually 5 pieces to this. Environmental remediation of the north half, the signal for Memorial Parkway, demo of the old rec center and the existing City Hall, contingency, which I'll spend a little bit of time on, and then the relocation of Parks and Rec and special events that are currently occupying the basement. So with that, and I kept this up because I just wanted to share this with you, is that we've done phase 2 environmental on the site. And there are hot spots of lead and arsenic on the north half of the site. So with that, we had some preliminary numbers done about what that might look like. And the number that stands out today is let me back up. With site remediation of environmental contamination, there's 2 tiers. There's commercial and residential. Residential has a higher level of remediation than commercial. So the $1 million that we reflect in the budget is for the north half of the site, and it assumes the entire site is residential. That also does not that assumes that we would effectively go in and over-excavate, take out all the dirt, and put in new dirt, okay? I'm oversimplifying this conversation because it's a little bit more complicated than that. There are gradations to that conversation. If it's a commercial area, there's less potential remediation, and there's also alternative means and methods that we can look at that will provide a clean site that doesn't necessarily yield $1 million expense. We're not there yet because we're still too early on in that process. Right now, this is what our best educated guess is as to what that financial expense is going to be. And I point this out because we have commercial here and over here, and then we have this residential. And ironically, the hot spot is on the back side of the rec center. So where the pocket park is where the most contaminated area is. So I just want to mention that there's a lot of what ifs, and there's probably variability to that as well.
So when you talk about that and you point to that area,
Yep.
I'm sorry, but is that the old rec center basically?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is right over here on the north side of the rec center. There's a concrete patio area, and that's one of the hot spots. But the entire site has contaminated lead and arsenic levels. And as I mentioned in the memo, and I'll just say this for the public, is that we believe that this is actually the low spot of a drainage basin, this entire property. And so what we believe happened is that over time, agricultural runoff deposited here, and that when they built the rec center at that time, there wasn't the same environmental standards that we now have in place. And so it's likely either that or they imported agricultural land into this area that was contaminated unknowingly in doing that. But because it's underground and it's covered, it's not a health risk today. It's just that because we're in a new era and a new set of requirements, when you disturb the area, you have to bring it into compliance.
May I speak?
Yes, please.
I think you know where I'm going, but I'll just walk myself into it. So is there a risk that we could walk into the same problem that we had over at, on the other side of my life in Nura, over at Walmart? I know that that was caused by grease traps and, you know, stuff like that.
It's a different type of contamination. We will be doing what's called a V-Cup through the state CDPHE.
Okay.
We will be doing that, but it's a different type of contamination, and so it has a different set of standards to it. But we'll know more about what that looks like. The early conversations are such that we might be able to mix material with the contaminated soil and take it to a different repository, which would provide a lower price per yard cost than it would otherwise if we took it as completely hot. So there's a couple of different means and methods that we're going to explore as we move through that.
Are there wells on this property like there are over there?
No.
Thank you.
And the one thing I would add is that CDPHE, I think, looks more favorably when it's a local government that's not going away when they're working at the remediation process.
Yeah.
So when we worked on the Walmart site, they were certainly very good to work with and accommodating and making sure that they knew we were going to be there for the long term as well, and I think that helps.
They're still.
And I will say is that if you want to nerd out like a planner and go onto Google Earth, not Google Maps, you can go back on time on their sliding scale. And what's very interesting is that there used to be an irrigation ditch that ran just like this.
Wow.
And so that is essentially where the break point is for the contamination. So
Okay.
when we did the testing on the south side and over here, we did not encounter anything close to the levels that we're talking about that would trigger or need a remediation. So just wanted to clarify that also for everybody. So the next two pieces that we have to this conversation is the signalization, which was actually identified in the previous phase one, and we're just carrying that forward. So that is a cost, but it's also a savings from the previous. So it's a net. It's not like a necessarily increase. It's a savings from the phase one that we're just carrying forward. And then also with the demolition of the old rec center and the existing city hall is with the old rec center, that was also a cost that we had identified in phase one that we're carrying forward. And the demo of the city hall is the new cost that we're doing. And we're taking the early steps for that just to get the remediation analysis done so we can determine whether there's asbestos and what level of demo that remediation we have to do with those demos. So having said that, I'm going to skip the contingency and come back to that and talk about the relocation of parks and this event storage. And so right now, those two uses occupy about 2,600 square feet of the basement. And one of the things that we were talking with AMD is that to accommodate that in a new building like this has a price per square foot. And we said, it's probably going to be cheaper if we can find a different place than trying to fit it into this building. And so that's part of this analysis is that we've come up with a location over at the east side of EB Rains, where, as some of you may know, there's the parking lot with the two porta potties. We're looking at that little horseshoe area as the future location for this. And we're taking a number of about $250 a square foot for this. This is not unlike the new Parks Barn type construction that we have out in M&O, so that's what we're looking at. But we also are throwing out this number because once again, we're in the early phases here, but we want you to understand that that's an associated cost that we're taking out of this building because it's more cost-effective approach.
Can't we put it over at M&O rather than, I know M&O is really crowded, rather than use up that space?
So
Because you're talking where the parking lot is, right?
Yeah, and right at the end of the parking lot on the west side, on the east side, there's that little porta potty area. And so it's like a little horseshoe over there. And so we're looking at putting that structure there. So the challenge that we would have with that is that parks would have an inordinate amount of extra time and effort to be able to do trips of being able to have to move the equipment over there that they currently have staged downstairs, because originally, before we had the new rec center, they had a space out here behind City Hall, and so we're trying to preserve that. The other challenge is that with the special events, stuff and all the active programming that we have, we've already taken up enough space over at M&O because there's Conex boxes galore of stuff. This is stuff that I think is probably more integral to being able to do not just the bigger events, but also the smaller events when we have out there. And so it's really just a function of not convenience, but of efficiency and ensuring that we've got a great ability for them to be able to have what they need in the immediate area for need.
How many square feet?
2,600 is what we're looking at. Now, I do want to mention that right now, the special events is spread out in the old jail cells and in other awkward spaces. And so when we go through this process, there might be some efficiencies in storage. But right now, we're being conservative. We don't want to underestimate.
Yeah.
We want to go bigger on the assumptions.
Thank you.
So there's going to be no more parking on the east side of EB Ratings Park?
No. Are you familiar with where the portalets are? We're going to go into that little knoll there.
Oh, okay.
We're not going to take any parking away.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, and then lastly, contingency. So this contingency is 10% of the combined site development costs and the city hall costs. And so I want to throw that out there because typically what we do through the city process is when we go through the, with the contractor that we'll select, what we do is when we get to DDs, the design development drawings, that's our first opportunity for the general contractor to come back with an initial guaranteed maximum price. We reduce that contingency down to 5%. Okay. Then with the CD package, we get a final guaranteed maximum price, and we typically reduce the contingency down to 3%. So the point is that this is where we are today because this is the responsible way to manage risk as we move forward. Now, am I going to tell you that 10% is going to change and it's going to go down to 3%? Well, we may see increased costs in the actual development drawings that may eat up some of that 10%. So, but obviously, we want to be as conservative as we are with you today, knowing what we know. So that kind of is a nutshell of how we got to this current price and this current ask. And then I will just briefly touch on the funding sources for council, and then I'm going to stop talking.
Okay, no, I appreciate it.
So right now, the way we have
Water, ask the water down.
right now, how we have this set up is we're looking at using $8 million from the general reserve fund, and Jason will know the answer to your question.
I'm not even going to ask it because I want to spend, we need to spend that down and get to a more reasonable.
Right. And then also and I want to also mention to council and to the public is that this is not a dissimilar formula that we haven't shared with you in the past when we first talked about this process. But 0.5% sales tax, 14.6 million, the marijuana tax, 4.5, and then right now we have a conservative estimate of 1.5 million in phase one carryover. The reason why I say that is because we're still reconciling savings with the general contractor that we're trying to figure that out. And this also includes carryover from the NURA bond appropriations as well. And so we're still in that reconciliation phase of working through that. But right now, that's kind of what we're looking at as far as a price for carryover from phase one. So with that, I will open it up to any questions that council may have. Oh, and
Councilmember
I guess,
Brown.
I'm sorry, I should also say is that what we're looking at here is a $10.6 million budget discussion.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown?
Sorry, Mayor.
That's okay, I'm just looking at. the
How can we count the marijuana tax into this project when we've already allocated it over to, here he comes, when we've already allocated it over to the PD? And are we applying any of it over to the rec center? So how does that, tell me a story how we can do that.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'd love to tell a story. So the project funding, initially the $18 to $19 million was going to use the built-up reserves that we have of the 0.5% sales tax and the 4% special marijuana tax. So that's actually sitting in reserves. The ongoing revenue that we're collecting from that is being used to finance the debt service for those other two facilities that you mentioned. So this, the total reserve that has built up in a 0.5% sales tax is $17.2 million, and then in the marijuana tax, $4.5 million. So it's the ongoing revenue stream that's going to fund those projects, and then the one-time use of the reserve that has been built up.
What I don't want to do, because one of the things that I hear is that we, like the last time that we raised the taxes on the marijuana, it was, oh, so you could have this new shiny building, So I want to be cognizant of that as we move forward, that I really don't want to go back and raise the marijuana taxes. I'm just going to throw it out there now in order to fund this building. I'm just throwing it out now so that we're all aware of it.
We're not proposing any increase to any tax.
Oh, we do that on our own. Yeah, I guess I don't understand. I mean, I understand the reserves, and the portion of the marijuana tax reserve, doesn't that have to be used to pay back for the PD loan?
No, that's going to be used from ongoing
And we're
revenue that's
using,
generated. And so much like the general fund reserve, there's a reserve of the 0.5% and of the special marijuana tax that has accumulated over time. And so this is all one time, not financed, really the number that we see, of 28 million or whatever the total is the number that we're expecting to pay. So no financing over any
so we're
period
not
of
going to
time.
take any bonds out on this. We're going to take care of it.
Correct.
That makes me feel very good. I feel that you've underestimated how much this is going to cost. Inflation right now is 7.5%. I think that we've underestimated. I would like you, I know we can't size it up until we get to the CMR, is that what he is? She or he. I know we can't sum it up until then, but I think that we have to have an expectation that the economy is not going to fall right back in place. We've done COVID, now we've got our own little situation going on the other side of the world. I just want us to be prepared for that. And I know that you are totally there, both of you, for me, but I do think that this is underpriced by the time we get to the build stage, till the time we're making the deal. So should we start talking and in our minds build, and on paper, building it up at a higher, at more than what you had, so that there's not that sticker shock at the end, like, Brooke, you came to us and you said 28 million. Well, I know you calculated in some of the inflation, but now, Becky, it's going to be 36 million.
Yeah, I think that, I think that's part of the contingency conversation that Brooke mentioned, that we're already building in, potentially an additional 5% to an additional 10%, but as we kind of whittle down the design,
right,
we'll, kind of dial that back as we go forward. The construction of office buildings specifically, I was looking this up in the past few days, in Denver has gone up 22% in the last 12 months. So the shorter version of the conversation from earlier is our $18 million budget, for a building, we had estimated that at like $430 a square foot. 22% increase over the last 12 months is about turns into $530 a square foot, which is exactly what we're proposing in the construction of the building cost. So I think that we're in pretty good shape. I think, from 2020 till today, we're all seeing the huge influx. Forecasts for 2023 are actually more towards normal levels of 3%. Who knows how accurate those forecasts are from the experts? But we are expecting to see kind of a balance. And again, I think knowing what we know today, to your point of who knows what's going to happen once we do competitive bidding on the project. That historically, on our last two projects, has actually driven some costs down because you get that competition and really start tightening screws when you're working with those subcontractors, so.
I'm more worried about inflation with this project than I was with any other project. You know, I was very comfortable with the ranges that we originally started talking about with the PD and the rec center. But this one, I'm very uncomfortable with. I'm not saying that that's a negative thing.
It's the reality.
It's the reality of life right now. And then my last question, then I'll give it over to everybody else, is Heather, are we looking at in the new city hall, any more of a hybrid situation so that we have less employees in there, which, don't look at me like that, could lead to resulting in the downsizing the building a little bit? I don't know how many employees here work from home now. Oh, good, come on up.
Yeah. So then, through programming, we actually explored both the hybrid policies that are currently in place, which was a test program for now, right? And I think what we came to the conclusion of was we don't know what's going to happen in the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and the hybrid format may change. And so if this is going to be a 50 or 100-year building, it would be short-sighted to build half of what the staff actually needs when we don't know in the future.
I think we really have to be cognizant of the fact that the world around us is changing, just like we talked about before. The common workplace is not the common workplace, and I don't see it going back, COVID restrictions have, been lifted and blah, 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 blah. We're at the end of it. I'm not going back to an office. None of my coworkers are going back to an office. That huge Alliance Data building, they told them, you're never coming back. You're going to work from home. And look where that is. So I just want to, I'm not saying shrink the building down to half the size or anything like that. I just want to make sure that we're using the space the most effective way that we can, and we aren't going one-to-one, using a one-to-one ratio for employees to how much space we need.
I think we've landed in a good space with where we're at with the programming. EMD has been great in terms of guiding us on what industry trends they've seen. And so, we've done a lot of heavy lifting on the front end and going back to staff and having conversations about office size space. I think we've started out probably a little too small, and then we really opened our eyes. We've got to be realistic. Because I think with government, we can always look to corporate and other industries. Government, I think, is different. And so we can look to those partners to say, as a guiding force of, okay, this is what they're doing, but our services that we provide to our constituents are different. And so how do we make sure we build that building to that 50, 100 years when all of us sitting in this room are not in this room? Well, you'll be in a different building, a much nicer building, right? So, that's where we've gone back and forth. And I think, the leadership team's comfortable with where we landed in terms of office sizes. And, there's much more refinement to be done, as Stefan and Joey pointed out earlier. But to very directly answer your question, no, we have not cut offices in half and said it's like full remote. I mean, that's just not going to happen in order to provide the level of service that we are committed to providing today. And I would imagine hopefully far into the future.
Can you check with Thornton? I've often wondered this because they have that huge lot, right? Mm-hmm. Can you just find out if all of that is being used? That's a curiosity question on mine.
It's not.
I didn't think so
I know, it depends on the department. And there's so much that plays into, you have a building that was built at a certain time and then the actual utilization living through a global pandemic, right? Mm-hmm. So I can tell you though, related to your question, Councilmember Brown, Most of all the other jurisdictions around us have gone back. Westminster, probably not so much, but the county. They were one of the first entities to really go remote and full remote, and they're back in buildings. And so Thornton, I believe, is still in more of a hybrid approach, and they've asked, for our policy and that sort of thing. And so another reminder is not all of our positions in the city can utilize hybrid remote work.
Right.
And again, it goes back to service provision.
Thank you for answering my questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Wilford.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Jason, I'm glad you're still up here in the hot seat with us. Can you remind me of what the general fund reserve balance is? Do you know off the top of your head? I'm sorry.
I let him off the hook on that one.
No, I'll give a precise 87%. So, and I'm going to expand on that question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
So, given the plan that we have, presented and strategy to pay, we've also factored in a few unknown things that we kind of know about, but we don't have like real good numbers on, so we've made some estimates. And so this strategy will take that number down to 48%, not just the one-time $8 million, but there's another $6 million worth of one-time projects that we have some ideas about. So that's the overall kind of impact to the general fund balance, taking that from 88% to 48%.
Okay. And what is best practice again?
25? Well, 25 is the minimum that has been established by policy.
Got it.
So we would say 25 would be the baseline for us.
Okay, that's helpful. I appreciate that. And part of the reason I asked is I just wanted council to understand that we have this money, we have a healthy fund balance, we are in a good place. And when we think about one-time uses for funding, this is a perfect project for a one-time use. And if we are able to pay in cash, then we're not paying those participation bonds, every month and annually that are going to add up. And so we will have a bit more flexibility, and the cost of operating this building hopefully won't be as expensive as it is for the rec center. So just a little bit more context there for y'all. And, I'm a little nervous about that big number, but I also, when I think about the grand plan that's happening here, I do think that a city hall that is going to continue to grow and provide the space that we need to evolve as a community is really important. And so if we are confident that we have everything that we need in this plan, I'm interested in moving forward with. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Goff.
Thank you. So one question I had is, we're hearing about all this federal infrastructure and other kind of one-time funds. Are any of those going to be able to be applied to building this building? Do we know?
So, yes, we're looking at the IIJA as one of the options is brownfield for the remediation. And we on the leadership team are also trying to explore options on what's the best approach to go after some of these, because there's so many different resources that are available. What's the best approach to that? And we've done a cursory analysis on what is direct recipient to municipalities. That's probably a third of all the programs that we're aware of right now. Mm-hmm. There's going to be some that are going to be administered through the state and or through Dr. Cog. And so there's going to be some other avenues there. But right now, the one that stands out as the biggest and brightest, which Debbie is helping with, is the brownfields.
So there is a chance that these numbers could go down if we get that
Correct.
kind of funding. And then the other thing, I hear what Councilmember Brown was saying about, not having too much space and we're paying for it now. But on the other hand, I think in this building right now, once we had the opportunity with, the police department moving out, we've used the space. The city clerk's office moved. Even though it's just a relatively short amount of time, they really needed the space. And who knows what other kind of services might come into the future. So I think that, we could figure out what to do with space if we had it. So I agree with Mayor Pro Tem that I am excited about this project, and I'd be willing to move forward on it.
Thank you. No, that's okay. As Councilmember Goff brought up some of the infrastructure funding, it might be worth reaching out to the Colorado Energy Office because the governor's proposed, I think, something around 40 million that would be put into some sort of clean energy fund or some sort of clean buildings transition. And so that's supposed to be a grant fund for local governments to be able to draw down dollars to be able to do something like net zero buildings. So that, I mean, it's worth reaching out because we could potentially get the cost of that covered and knock off, some additional funding. So.
Absolutely. We're waiting for the state agencies to stand up the programs. And that's the big thing is I think most of them are still trying to get direction on what the programming can be and how it's structured. So I know that CDPHE is got the same challenge as well as CDOT right now. So
Yeah, well, hopefully, fingers crossed, they can get it together and make these programs available because I think there are a lot of amazing ideas like this one that could use the funding.
And I only pointed this up because the other thing is with these boxes is that we're also looking at these as potential future expansion of growth into the site. So I just didn't want to lose that thought that we've also, as part of our programming today where we are, is that we're thinking of that in the future as well.
And we are selling the land, right?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. You know where I'm going.
There is also, we'll probably talk a little bit more in executive session, is the equity that we have in the RDA and how that could also influence our budget.
Okay. Got that settlement.
Jason has told me not to talk much about it, so I'm kidding.
Really quickly, thank you for the presentation, but also to AMD, the memo is so thorough and the images are cool. I know they're not a map. I know it's not a blueprint at all, but it is interesting to see the spaces that are being considered. It's just nice. So thank you for that.
It's exciting again, don't you?
It is so exciting. Oh my goodness. So I'm fully in support. I do it. Do it all. It sounds amazing. But I want to make sure that every council member, yes?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so full support for the budget increase. And then circling back to our first conversation, full support to keep moving forward on the conceptual site plan as presented tonight.
And location of City Hall.
And location of City Hall. Thank you.
Yes. 3 things. 3 things.
Awesome.
We're so excited. Thank you.
Yeah, well done.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Anything else before we move on?
No.
No? Okay. Hearing none, I'm adjourning the study session. We're going to proceed to the special city council meeting. Joanna, where is the most, I will wait. I know where it is. Never mind. I figured it out on my own this time. Thank you, guests, for coming. I will adjourn the study session. Now I'm going to call to order the special meeting.
Not with
I will now call to order the special city council meeting of March 10th, 2022. Joanna, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Lighty,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford,
Here.
Councilmember Rick Fish is absent, Councilmember Jaramillo,
Here.
Councilmember Durant Mulligan is absent, Councilmember Whitman Haramasa,
Here.
Councilmember Goff,
Here.
Councilmember Brown,
Here.
Councilmember Walker.
Here.
Excellent. I will entertain a motion to adjourn to executive session pursuant to Section 4.5G of the City of Northglenn Home Rule Charter for negotiations regarding the P3 project.
Motion to move
Second.
to executive session.
Second. Okay, we're going efficient tonight. All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Great, the motion carries. We will adjourn to executive session. We're going to take a break in between. So if you need to stretch or
Get water.
get water, if you need to get.